Hey everybody, the weather is beautiful today. It's summer where I am, and I'm going out to do some sketching plein air, and I wanted to show you what I put in my kit when I go outside to go sketch. You might think it's pretty self-explanatory, the stuff that you need to take out sketching when you're outside, but you'll see there's things that you might not have thought of until you get out into the field and you're sitting there and you're like, I wish I would have thought of that before I left the house. I'm excited to get out there, so I'll see you in a couple of minutes. So I realized after I got to my location where I was going to sketch that I forgot an important piece of equipment. I was going to do a drawing tutorial while I showed you what's in my drawing kit, but I forgot a crucial piece of equipment, which is the bracket I use to mount my camera phone to my drawing board. So I'm going to make this video just about the essential things you need in your plein air drawing kit. So I am at a park near one of the Great Lakes in the United States. Comment below if you can guess which Great Lake this is. Even though there's nothing significant as far as a landmark that's going to give that away. So kudos to you if you can guess it. So what do you need in your plein air drawing kit? First off, backpack. Put everything in a backpack with a collapsible stool, and then also a drawing pad, or excuse me, a drawing board with a clip on it for your sketch pad. So the drawing stool is really handy. It's very small. It collapses in on itself very easily. So you can stuff that into a backpack or use a bungee cord to strap it to the back of a backpack. So this one's a little worse for the wear. And that actually came with my plein air painting kit. So really any small collapsible stool will do, and pretty easy to find, I would imagine, on Amazon or an outdoor camping store like REI, etc. The drawing board, as I mentioned earlier, and this is up to you whether you want to use the drawing board. And the reason I have that is if you use a smaller drawing pad, it just makes it easier to balance the sketch pad on your lap. If you have a larger sketch pad, it's a little bit easier to balance that, and you may not need the drawing board. So just kind of a nice thing to have in any event. The backpack, which I mentioned, and it might sound really obvious to have a backpack, but I think if you're thinking about sketching outside, you might just run out of the house with your sketch pad and pencils, and you'll come to discover that there's more things that you need, and just having it all in a backpack that you just have dedicated to your sketching kit makes things a lot easier. So you're not scrambling at the last minute. Okay, so what's actually in the backpack? Hopefully we have a sketch pad, which would help matters. So this is my go-to 9x12 Canson sketch pad. This is usually what I bring for plein air. I also have a smaller, I believe it's 8x10 or 6x8 sketch pad, which I use more for field sketching and planning out paintings. Then we have the pencil kit, and this is a really handy case that I have. The company's called Global Art. I've had this case for quite a number of years, and this zips open on the side. And I have quite a few things in here that come in handy for sketching, and also I use the same pencil kit for painting. So the first thing is this piece of red mylar, and you can get this on Amazon pretty easily. And what this is used for is for judging value, used more for in painting, more so in sketch, more than in sketching. So let me see if I can show you how this works. So what you do is you put the mylar up to your scene, and you can see how it eliminates the color and turns everything to more or less grayscale. What that does, it allows you to see the value and not the color. So a really handy item. I use it occasionally when I'm sketching, but not that often. And also the grayscale value finder. So similar, what this does is you hold it up and it allows you to judge the value of what you're looking at. So you can see here, the shadow of the tree obviously is a darker value versus lighter value. So use more for painting than sketching. This viewfinder is very handy as well. You have probably come across this if you watch other tutorials. And this allows you to frame up the scene that you're drawing into standard formats like 6x8, 8x10. And this just slides across. There's demarcations here. See that 8x10, 12x16. You slide it to that proportion. And you hold that up to your scene to frame it. It makes cropping and deciding your composition much easier. And obviously, then you would match the proportion of that square onto your drawing pad. Here we have tools for sharpening pencils. So you'll notice the tips I have on these pencils are, you're not going to be able to do this in a mechanical pencil sharpener. So there's a technique of how to achieve that, which I can't get into here, but these are the tools I use for that. So you cut away the wood with an X-Acto knife, and then you sand the lead to a point, and then you wipe off the excess excess charcoal. So I have that on hand in case I break a lead while I'm out in the field. Which leads us to the pencils. And I always carry a range of 3 hardnesses of lead. Let's see if I can show you here. So I always have the middle value. The paint has worn off this, but this is an HB. That's your middle value. And then on either end, a darker lead like the 5B, and then a harder lead like the 3H. So those 3 pencils give me enough range while sketching. And then you'll see this is a handy erasing device. You're probably familiar with that. And then I also have these markers, which I use for no-tan studies, which is more for painting. And then also pastel, which I use occasionally. But really, you don't need these for sketching. It's really what you see here. And in lieu of the more complicated way to sharpen a pencil, you can just grab a portable, small pencil sharpener from any art supply store. So that really is it as far as the essential items for actually creating the drawing. And again, you don't necessarily need the drawing board, but a nice to have. So everything I'm going to walk through now is more for health and safety as you're outside for a number of hours. I usually like to spend more than 2 hours if I go on site somewhere. So that's where hydration and sun protection obviously is a factor. So obviously water bottle, which I showed you earlier, and a floppy hat, better than a baseball cap because it gives you more sun protection. And then sunscreen, insect repellent. I like the jungle juice, works really well. Doesn't have a strong odor to it. And lidocaine. So you might be asking, why do you need these 2 items? And what I would say is you would be surprised, even if you're in a public park in an urban area, it's very easy to get attacked by insects and critters and start to get bitten up. This happened to me a couple weeks ago. I was in a lakeside park in a pretty large urban area, in the early afternoon, nice summer day, and I went to an area that had a couple trees. Like it wasn't in the woods. It was in the a dominant part of the park where a lot of people are, and I got bitten up so badly. My legs just got attacked, and I didn't have insect repellent because I didn't think of it. I didn't think it was that type of location where I would need it. And it's so bad that I had to go to Walgreens to get um, some cortisone. That's how bad it was. So I decided to bring something with lidocaine always with me so that you can just spray it on if you do get the what I think is probably the inevitable bug attack at some point. So I would just keep that in mind. It's something you would never think of, especially if you are in a populated urban area. You just don't think of that. But trust me, that'll happen at some point to you if you're out there sketching a lot. So that is my plein air drawing kit. Again, I recommend just keeping it all in a backpack for easy access so you can just grab it and go whenever you're out there. So another piece of advice I would give you if you want to do more sketching plein air is being a little bit more um, cognizant in how you plan where you're gonna go and where you're gonna sketch. And the reason I say that after doing this for a number of years is if you don't do that, you can inevitably run into a lot of problems that you hadn't even thought of that are going to take away from the time that you had to sketch. And I'm talking specifically about sketching out in nature, even if it's in an urban area, as opposed to what might be considered more urban sketching, like in a coffee shop. So what I'm about to tell you doesn't really apply to that because these issues don't come up when you're in, a coffee shop. So I think the first thing that I would tell you to do is figure out what inspires you and motivates you to want to sketch. Like, what are you drawn to? And what is it about the subject matter that would keep you coming back and wanting to sketch it more often? I think a lot of times when people are sketching, they might have a mindset of it being like a school assignment where it's something they have to sketch. And to me, that is the worst way to go about sketching. You should sketch subjects that appeal to you and you're drawn to, and let that be the first filter. So for being outside in nature, there's a lot of filtering you can do that will help you decide where to go. So for example, obviously I mentioned I'm at one of the Great Lakes, but I don't necessarily like to draw water, or I'm not necessarily drawn to marine themes like boating themes or sailboats, but there's a lot of that here. But there's so much else here as well. There's a lot of trees, there's a little bit of wildlife. So figure out what is it that you want to draw. Is it trees? Is it beaches? Is it urban life, which would be a different approach, right? Is it mountains? Obviously, it's not going to take much for you to figure that out. But once you figure that out, then you can kind of filter locations and figure out where to go to find that subject matter. So once you figure out what it is you want to draw, find locations around you that are easily accessible. So whether you have a car or it's public transportation or you're walking, figure out where to go that has what you're looking for visually. And an easy kind of rule of thumb is um, public spaces like parks, forest preserves, hiking trails are probably going to be your best bet. And there's a couple of reasons for that. For one, they're more than likely easy to get to, meaning they might be accessible by public transportation or easily accessible by car or bike. Another factor is if you're out there for a couple hours, I usually like I mentioned earlier, I like to be out for a couple hours. They usually have public restrooms, so that's important, something you may not think about. And they usually have a source of water. They have a water fountain usually, and on a hot summer day, that's something that's you take for granted before you leave the house, but you're going to be grateful that you have those facilities once you get out in the field. So when you figure out a couple locations that work for you, as far as having the visual inspiration that you're looking for, having the facilities I mentioned, having the easy access, you might come up with a list of two or three or four of those. Then kind of keep those in your arsenal. I got some visitors over here. Keep those locations in your rotation and go back to them, because one of the things I learned over the years is you can spend a lot of time, waste a lot of time just finding that location, and you end up never actually drawing because you're either driving around trying to find a spot, and by the time you find a spot, the day has gotten away from you. So it's good to have those places to go back to and just kind of your go-to spots that you go to over and over. Another easy way to overcome some of these questions that I just talked about is to find a group in your area. A lot of major urban areas have sketching groups, especially urban sketching groups. Probably less so going to locations like I like out in nature. But you'd be surprised. I mean, a lot of urban places have so many parks, and they probably frequent those. So it's a great thing to do to build up a social network of other artists and take the guesswork out of where to go. So I hope you found this helpful, and hopefully I gave you some ideas about what to make sure to include in your drawing kit. Hopefully it's not as simple as you might have thought it was. Thanks so much for watching. My name is David. I appreciate you watching this video, and we'll see you next time. Bye bye.